In the last video that you watched, or one of the last videos, you watched about how, or elements of an argument text. You've heard about the claim, you talked about bias and evidence and reasons. And so now what we're going to do is use a mentor text, and we are going to look for ways that writers communicate a bias, or they show that their argument that they are making is the correct argument. So what I've done is I've taken a copy of one of the pages from the article that you're reading in reading class, the Our Phones Making Us Zombies. And I'm going to do part of this with you, and then you're going to move off independently or preferably with a partner. I would really like for you to do this with somebody else because the power of multiple brains is really going to make you even smarter than just your brain. What we are going to be doing today is looking for ways or things that writers do to communicate in an argument. What kinds of evidence do they use? What kind of language do they use, etc. What you're going to do is in your resource journal, you are going to get this piece of paper off of the front table, and you're going to glue it to page 138 so that the 139 is next to it. If for some reason your 138 is here, make sure that this gets glued on the left-hand side of the page. So it might be on 137 or whatever in order to make there be two open pages next to each other. Okay, so you're going to pause for just a second and go get that glued, and then you're going to come back and finish watching this video. Okay, so now that you are glued, here is what your goal is as a reader. You are going to read through this page of text, and you're going to underline at least 8 different places where you see that the writer has used powerful evidence. And I'm not going to define powerful evidence for you necessarily, but what you're looking for as a reader is a place where as you read, author says something that makes you go, that's a pretty good point. I'm starting to think like you. It doesn't mean you believe what the writer is saying. It doesn't mean you think your phone is turning you into a zombie, but it's what strategies did the writer use in order to try to communicate with you about his or her purpose. I'm going to read through just these couple of paragraphs here under warning signs and tell you some of the ways that I am thinking. And then you're going to continue down through the rest of the piece and look for other examples of powerful evidence. Okay, we are not annotating at this point the parts that you like or the parts that are interesting to you or the parts that you're not asking questions necessarily. You are reading this as a writer. What did they do as a writer to communicate bias for their side of the argument? Okay, so we're going to take a look at the word warning signs. And the first thing I'm going to circle is the word warning. That is, to me, this is a heavily connotated word. If I'm giving someone a warning, that's not usually a good thing. And so the word warning is a negative connotation, which tells me this writer probably believes that it is turning us into zombies. So, okay, for you, the risk of developing this kind of obsessive relationship with your phone, look at this, obsessive, with your phone is higher than it is for an adult because your brain is still developing. The parts of your brain that control pleasure and emotion are more developed than the parts that control logic and reasoning. This affects your decision making and makes you more vulnerable to the addictive aspects of a smartphone. So again, do you see I have these 4 words and all of them lead back to this heavily negative connotation. So obviously I'm getting the idea that the reader or the writer is trying to communicate that this is negative. The other thing that I noticed here as a reader is, do you notice who they're talking to? Do you see how they say you? I think it's a female writer. Do you see how she says you throughout and you and your? One thing to consider when you're doing an argument or any type of writing is that they really played to audience. What she's done here is she knows this article is not for me as an adult. This article is written and designed for kids around your age. And so she did not tell me about me sitting around playing Candy Crush. She's talking about your phone, your brain. And anytime you can use the word you, it really puts your reader into the shoes of the writer. Writers often do this with telling little anecdotes or stories. Here it looks like they use some science. I don't have any more colors, so you have to deal with just 2 colors. There's some science here about the development of the brain. So already in this first paragraph, I have 3 different ways that I'm seeing that this writer is trying to show me some of the negative elements. of this. So I'm going to do this next paragraph, and then you're going to continue through the text independently or with a partner is my preference. I'm looking for other examples that you notice as a reader that she is using to communicate this bias. Okay, for example, anytime we see for example, we're about to hear a story. You might understand that checking your phone while doing your math homework isn't a good idea, but because your brain is hyper-focused on seeking out pleasurable experiences, the lure of your device can overpower everything else. So instead of putting your phone away while you're studying, you continue to check it every few minutes. Suddenly, 4 hours have passed and you've worked through only 2 math problems out of 20. Okay, so here I noticed she gave an example and then she kind of told like a little story, and it's not a personal story, a short personal story. Well, I guess it doesn't really have to be personal. I'm probably wrong. It's called an anecdote. A-N-E-C. I can't spell it right today. It's early right now. You can't see that it's early, but it's early. So a short personal story is called an anecdote. I think there's an E in there somewhere. And so what that does is it helps relate to your reader because it's an experience that proves the point. Like, hey, you're just doing some math homework and all of a sudden you want to check your phone, but you shouldn't, but you're going to do it anyway. So this little paragraph here is a short story per se, and it is called an anecdote. And we're hoping, I can't remember how to spell that word, but we're going to pretend that that's how you spell it. So a short story is called an anecdote. Notice it's only a few sentences long. She didn't use the entire passage to do that, but what she did was simply focus on that one little part because she knows that most of you have probably had math homework before and wanted to check your phone while you're doing it. Your goal as you go is to annotate, but not in a way that is putting your feelings about the text out there. You are simply looking for and underlining different things the writer did to connect to the reader to prove that her argument that phones might be turning us into zombies is correct. Okay? Sometimes she may not ever say she believes that, but based on the heavily connotated language, putting you in these negative situations with your phone, using the science of how the brain isn't developed, those things are starting to show me that she probably believes that our phones are turning us into zombies. So you may notice that there are statistics. You may notice who they talk to. You may notice other anecdotes. You don't necessarily have to mark every anecdote, but maybe you now put like a little boxy line like this. If she does another anecdote, you just kind of put another line around that and label it with an A. And you're like, look, another anecdote. Or if you notice more science, maybe you just put a little box there and put SCI for science. And you can start to notice how much science did she use and how many statistics and how many little anecdotes did she do. Were there other ways that she played to her audience? Because again, remember, her audience is not adults. It is your age group. Okay? So on this side of the paper where you have the article, don't go on to the blank page that's next to it. You're going to annotate for what the writer does. After you have read and annotated this piece right here, looking for different things that you've noticed, there is going to be another video that gives you has you take notes about the evidence, the types of evidence that writers use. You may notice that you found some of those. You may notice you found all of those. You may notice that you found something there that isn't in the evidence video that you watched for your notes. Feel free to add, because the list that I give you is not going to be the end-all be-all list of the types of evidence that's powerful that writers use. Okay, so after you have completed both this and this side over here, of course, you'll bring it to me. Happy reading.